When James walked into the restaurant, everything was calm until the waiter, Todd, looked him up and down and said, "We don't serve people like you here." A heavy silence fell over the room. James had dealt with racism before, but this was too much. But what happened next changed everything.
The busy streets of New York buzzed with energy as James Harper, a poised black man in his late 30s, walked into a high-end restaurant. His sharp suit clung to him with the elegance of someone who commanded attention, yet his demeanor was calm, even regal. The moment he stepped inside, the murmur of conversation slowed, and eyes turned in his direction. Standing at the podium was Todd Brooks, a middle-aged white man with a tight, emotionless expression. The air between them thickened the second their gazes met. Todd's eyes briefly scanned James's attire, lingering just a bit too long, before he spoke with the practiced coldness of someone accustomed to authority. "Do you have a reservation?" Todd's voice was almost mechanical, a stark contrast to the warmth one might expect in a fine restaurant. James, taken aback but maintaining his poise, nodded, ready to offer his name. But before he could speak, he noticed a flicker of something. Discomfort, maybe, flashing across Todd's face, quickly replaced by a veneer of indifference. "I'm afraid we don't have a table for you," Todd said, the words slicing through the air like a cold draft. "You might want to try somewhere else." James froze, his heart skipping a beat as the weight of the rejection settled in. The other patrons, who had been previously engrossed in their meals, were now watching him with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. James felt their eyes, but it wasn't their stares that stung the most. It was the sheer audacity of Todd's words. For a split second, the world around him seemed to blur, as if the scene had been lifted out of time. But James wasn't one to lose control. With a calmness he didn't fully feel, he looked Todd in the eyes and said, "I have a reservation, under the name Harper." Todd glanced at the reservation list. His eyes didn't meet James's, but the message was clear. He scanned the paper slowly, his fingers lingering for an uncomfortable moment before he spoke again. "There must be some mistake. We don't serve people like you here." The words were heavy, deliberate, and they hit harder than anything James could have anticipated. His mind raced, struggling to process it. But the reality of what had just been said settled over him like a cold shroud. In this city, in this day and age, this was happening? James felt his hands tense, the muscles in his fingers tightening into fists. But he knew better than to lose his composure, especially now. He had dealt with worse, far worse, in his life. But this blatant racism, this unapologetic injustice, was different. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden behind polite smiles or veiled words. It was raw, and it was aimed directly at him. The weight of it hit him harder than expected. Around him, the soft murmur of the restaurant grew louder. Whispers spread like wildfire, like a virus, and soon the rustling of napkins and the scrape of chairs echoed in his ears. Eyes were now on him, the kind of eyes that whispered judgment, the kind that dared not intervene but could not look away. He could feel the heat of their stares, the discomfort of those who had once been wrapped in the warmth of their meals now chilled by the scene unfolding before them. Todd, still standing behind the podium, had not budged an inch. His face remained locked in that cold, smug expression, as though this were all just a minor inconvenience, a mere obstacle to his orderly world. The arrogance in his eyes made everything worse. "Is this how you treat your customers?" James's voice cut through the tension, quiet but sharp. He forced the words out, though every syllable burned with indignation. Todd didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "Not all customers are equal, Mr. Harper. Maybe you should go back to your neighborhood." The words landed like a slap. The bluntness of it, the blatant disdain, was almost too much to bear. The sting echoed in the pit of his stomach, but James refused to let it show. He took a deep breath, drawing on a lifetime of practice, years of learning how to control his reactions, how to keep his emotions in check, no matter what was thrown his way. His jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. This wasn't just about him. He knew that. It wasn't about one man's rejection in a restaurant. It was about something much larger, an insidious, deeply rooted issue that stretched far beyond this moment. James's anger simmered just below the surface, but he knew the battle he faced here wasn't just personal. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The tension in the air seemed to grow thicker with each passing second. Just as James was about to speak again, a voice broke through the oppressive silence, a voice that James immediately recognized, though he hadn't expected to hear it now. "Is there a problem here, Todd?" The voice was calm but commanding, one that could silence a room without raising its volume. Richard Bellamy, the owner of the restaurant, had entered the scene. James turned, his pulse still racing, and saw the familiar face of Richard. A well-known philanthropist and businessman, Bellamy's reputation preceded him, a man often lauded for his charity work and polished public image. His features were impeccably groomed, and he held himself with the kind of confidence that only those accustomed to power could. Todd's eyes widened as he clearly wasn't prepared for Bellamy's sudden appearance. For a moment he stood frozen, taken off guard. The mask of indifference he'd worn so effortlessly cracked, revealing a moment of hesitation. "I just thought—" Todd stammered, trying to explain himself, but the interruption was immediate. "You thought what?" Richard's voice sharpened with authority, each word like a crack of a whip. His gaze flicked back to Todd for a moment before turning to James, his expression softening as he made eye contact. "I sincerely apologize for this," Richard said, his voice now laced with genuine regret. "You'll be treated with the respect you deserve. Please come with me." James, caught off guard by the sudden shift, felt a brief moment of relief, but it was fleeting. His mind raced as the weight of the situation still pressed down on him. The apology, while appreciated, felt too little too late. The damage had been done. Yet there was a glimmer of justice now, an opening, however small, for right to be served. He nodded slightly, his jaw tight, and followed Richard without a word. The cool air of the back room awaited him, offering a small sanctuary from the weight of the dining room, where the eyes of the other patrons still lingered. James moved forward, still shaken, but the flicker of hope kept him moving. The road ahead, however, was far from clear. As James sat down, Richard motioned for him to make himself comfortable. "I'll take care of this," he promised, his voice now much softer. Todd, realizing he had gone too far, followed Richard into the back office. The exchange that followed was heated, but it wasn't James's battle to fight anymore. It was up to the business owner to make things right. Richard returned moments later, a stern look on his face. "Todd is no longer working here. I have zero tolerance for this kind of behavior." James's anger didn't disappear right away, but there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing that Todd's blatant racism had cost him his job. The right thing had been done. James stood and extended his hand to Richard. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady. "Thank you for your understanding. It's a privilege to have you here." As James left the restaurant that evening, the sense of victory was bittersweet. The fight against injustice was far from over, but for that moment, he had won.